Okay, Grandma, welcome back.
Thank you, sir.
I think last time we talked about wanting to do Fairfield a bit.
Okay.
We're going to talk about Fairfield, but before we did, I wanted to look at more of your wedding pictures, and you can. I know there's a lot, but we can go through them and flip through them, and you can tell me a little bit about them
Okay.
and some old artifacts and articles you pulled out. Oh, phone's ringing.
Oh,
1 second. Spam call. Spam message. Okay. I'll keep the phone just in case it
oh,
rings.
that will be. We'll keep it under cover.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll flip through it and you can sort of tell me a little bit about.
Well, that's a nice picture of Rod's brother's wife. Her name is Diane,
Hmm.
and that was Jack's wife, and she had been up there for the
Can you
wedding.
pull the mic a little closer?
Okay.
There you go.
Can you hear okay now?
Yeah, we're good there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, that was Diane Allee, and she was at the wedding, and Jack was in the wedding, I'm sure. That's my mother. We're just posing for a picture to kind of see that she's helping me get things straightened out and so forth.
Yeah.
And
We do both sides. So.
yeah.
So.
And then there's Rod and me. I don't know if my eyes are open or closed in that one, but anyway. Then that's a picture of me, of course.
Now, is this where? That was the main hall, huh?
Now, the lady playing the piano, that was up front.
I'm gonna close these blinds.
Okay. Anyway,
Sorry, there was a glare
oh,
on the
sorry.
pictures. So
The
this
lady,
is the banquet hall. Or the
this
hall?
is the church where the service was, the Bethlehem church where we had gone to church for probably 15 or 20 years.
Mm.
And the lady playing the piano was my music teacher.
Oh, right here.
She lived close to Ripley in a nice big fine place on a farm, and she had two little boys, and she would keep them kind of controlled and contained while she gave me piano lessons. She was a very nice lady.
Oh, that's nice.
And that was my dad and me coming down the aisle. It's a good picture of my dad. He had already had his surgery and was getting a little bit more fragile all the time, but he was willing to do that and participate in the wedding, and that was all good.
Mm. Nice.
And that's the car. They had never had a wedding in that church like that ever, I don't think. It was just little private ceremonies, maybe one or two people at a time. That's just a picture of the front of the building to show the facility.
Nice.
It was a very kind of a small, little humble church.
Who are these ladies?
And the girl on my left in the picture would be Ann Lippert at the time. We found out she was a distant cousin of the family, and we went to the same school. The other two girls are girls from nurses training. One is named Brenda and one is named Treva, and they were my attendants on my side to be in the wedding.
Nice.
Those were two nurses. And the building was filled that day.
Was it?
Oh yes, it was. It was just every seat was filled. We had family. We had people that came up. A few folks came up from Fairfield, which is quite a trek, because it was a lot of miles for some of the older people to drive. 75 miles to
Yeah.
the church area.
Now, who would...
And then that's some of the people coming out, some of the older church members. I don't recall their name, but you'd stand at the door and greet everybody as they came
Yeah.
at the wedding, you know. I guess that's a picture of the wedding party all together. Rod's portion of the folks, and there's Jack next to him, and there's my brother. I believe that's Charlie Bell over there on the far right.
Charlie Bell?
Yeah, that would be Charlie Bell. He's a missionary friend from South Africa,
Yeah.
Zambia, and all that. He was, I'll tell you a little bit more about him a little later in the story. So
Now, that painting in the background looks a little familiar.
it is. It's a typical painting of Christ. It's a nice one.
I think you have one somewhere in this house. I think it's in the...
We probably do.
I think it's in the computer room. I was curious as if that was the actual photo.
Oh no.
That
It's-
belongs to the church, probably.
Yeah,
That church.
that was a very familiar, nice painting to
I see.
have there. And then that's Lester LeMay and my music teacher. They're just posing for that picture there.
Yeah.
But Lester was from here in California,
Okay.
in the first church that Grandpa went to at Inglewood, and he came all the way to Cincinnati to college also, and he was preaching about 4 miles down the road from where we started in Fairfield.
Huh.
But we were, Rod was his forwarding agent and Charlie Bell's. I'll tell you what that means in a minute.
Oh, okay.
And that's some of the overview of the picture of people at the reception,
Mm-hmm.
where we had the cake and the punch and all that kind of thing.
Grandma and Grandpa cutting the cake.
Yeah. And that was my first time actually to be at a big wedding, to be in one.
Yeah.
We just didn't do things like that. And that's the famous thing where you're supposed to put cake or whatever in their mouth and it just goes everywhere, I guess. But we just did it.
There's
So let's see. There's that picture, and
there's another one.
oh, the lady in the next picture is an interesting thing. Is one that worked with Rod at the bank and just thought the world of him. And she was just so gracious to come and be at the wedding, and it was just all so special because he was just a little part-time worker there, but just did a bang-up job. I told you how they said they wanted to keep him and train him, but he says, well, he had decided to go in the ministry, and that was still his plan.
Yeah.
But she came because she just thought the world of him.
Wow.
And that's a long ways for them to travel to come to a wedding of just an acquaintance at work, you know.
Right.
There's another picture of Diane with the dark hair. And the one on the far left is my brother's wife, Libby. And she was helping in the stuff where we were doing the gifts. As I told you, we had just 2 giant tablesfuls of gifts, and you open every gift so the person sees you, that you appreciated it, you know, and then you send thank you notes. I was very late doing mine, but I was
Probably took a long time, huh?
pretty busy. It took we were done at midnight, I think. And think about it, that was in the gymnasium where people would have hours of saying, well, we close off at like 11 o'clock or whatever.
Right.
But someone just allowed us to do that and do the cleanup. They did that all later. And the other gal is Arlene Burbage. And I have to tell you something about that. There was not 1 full point difference between the highest score of the years of high school and the third person. There was not 1 full point between the first one and the third one. And she was the third one. She was very gracious to accept all that because she was a very smart gal.
Who was first?
Her name was Joyce Jones.
And were you second? Were you number 2?
Yeah.
Ah, very nice, Grandma.
I didn't aim to bring that out, but I thought that was so very grown up of her to, I don't know if she ever found out how close that number of scrutiny was, but it was very gracious of her. And that's the picture of the cake, and there's the topping that goes with it, right there. We saved that all these years.
Here it is. This is
So, yeah.
all those years ago.
Yeah, it's actually a pretty durable one. I guess they have different ones that last or don't. And some are little lightweight things, you know.
Yeah.
So that was it, and we were there until like almost midnight, and then next morning we got up and started for California.
And there's Libby again.
Mm-hmm.
What's Grandpa got in his hand? What is that?
Oh, it's a coffee pot, a Corningware coffee pot. That's an antique now.
I can't even tell.
I still have it.
Really?
Oh, yes.
Oh, goodness.
If you want it, I'll find it for you someday. But I knew it's valuable because you can boil in it and whatever and make coffee.
Very nice. Let's see if we got any more in here.
That's a coffee pot he's showing. And that's Charlie Bell.
Which one?
The one is Charlie Bell's the one on right in the photo.
Right
I think
here.
the other one's my brother, isn't it? My brother Charles. Yeah.
Is that him?
Yeah, it's him. And Rod and Charlie Bell, that's 2 Charleses, in fact. They were roommates for many years and got along very well together. Charlie Bell's sister-in-law lived over in Leona Valley.
Oh.
There we are with my eyes half open. They took a picture in the car, and that was
And this is them smooching.
a cute little picture they took. Grouped it together.
And there it is.
There it is.
Very nice. Now tell me about this little thing.
Oh, that is my mother's box that her wedding ring was in, and she did not have like a fancy ring with a set or whatever. And somehow or other through the years, she actually evidently wore it through, and it was lost probably in some of her work doing the gardening or the housework or whatever. But
Wow.
that was her wedding ring box. And the box I thought was so pretty. Just a special little thing. They don't have things like that nowadays that I know of anyway, but that was her box the wedding ring came in. That
Yeah.
was so sweet.
Almost looks like ivory. I can't remember.
It kind of does, doesn't
The way
it?
it's chipped right here, that might be ivory.
It could be.
Plastic doesn't really chip like that. Let me see.
In that
I'm
era,
sorry, this is ivory.
I wouldn't doubt it. That's
Yeah.
probably why it was
This is-
special and she kept it and it lasted that way.
The way it's chipped up here in the top left.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, you can't really see it on camera, but it's almost chipped off in like a grainy way. Plastic is really
Yeah.
When it chips, it
Yeah.
chips, and it's like glossy
Yeah.
the whole way. And this has almost got like a texture to it. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
this is ivory. This is
Yeah.
special. Hand carved and everything. Very nice.
I thought that was kind of sweet to show. Those are pins that are related to my mom and her work. The larger one is evidently one of her nursing pins. But the paper underneath there also shows that she became an LVN, and
Oh yeah, okay.
I had mentioned this. Only got to go to the 6th grade, but she was always very, very skilled at keeping up with everything that she did. So when she was able to get that job at the hospital, they asked her to come in for little upgrade learning classes and all that for years. You know, you learn how to do certain procedures. You have to keep up with that. And she had attended so many classes that one day they said to her, Elizabeth, it shows that you've attended enough classes that if you'd like to take 2 subjects, one was psychology and one was pharmacology, you could challenge and take the state boards to become an LVN if you wish to do that. So she thought, what was wrong with trying to do that? So she did it, and
Yeah.
she became an LVN.
Wow.
I was very proud of her. I think that was like, what year is that, Christian?
1970.
1970.
Wow.
So we were extra proud of how she did that. And they loved her at the hospital. I don't know if you can see the words on there, but I think it was the one where Mr. Roberto, who was the director and hired her that day, that she came in to apply for a job. He said that she had been such a faithful worker. They sent a contribution to the church that she attended because they just loved her.
Wow.
And that was after she had died. I only found that out about 2 or 3 months ago. I found that in some of the papers in the trunk.
Really?
So I need to see if I can find his address and share that I appreciate their concern and
Oh, wait, here it is.
doing that for her.
This is the memorial donation.
Yeah, it was just a really wonderful testimony to how she was so faithful. I tell you, I told the story already, but I'm going to tell it again. My dad was so sick and would have to be taken to Cincinnati to the hospital for certain appointments. She would come home from work from 11 to 7, get off duty at 7, drive probably 15 miles to her house, and she would help bathe my dad and get herself ready, drive to Cincinnati to an appointment, and it was kind of a luxury, but they got a kick out of doing it. Stop at probably McDonald's or something like that on the way home and get a little bite to eat. And she would get home and get him situated and then get herself ready for work again. And nobody at work was ever told what a busy day she'd had. She didn't even talk about it or fuss over it. She just did what she needed to do and was grateful to have her job.
Wow.
So that was part of her history, just the kind of person she was. Didn't feel sorry for herself. So she's a good example for me, to just do what you need to do. It was hard, and she also had the grief of knowing, and she had been around many people as they were getting sicker and failing in their health, in her own family. People used to be at home and not in hospitals a lot when they were that ill before they died. And she could see that he had a complicated thing. That was a hard thing to live through too, I'm sure. And then going into a hospital and seeing people every single shift that you worked that were fragile. And so I just think that was pretty remarkable. Now, you asked me a question once about who did I think were some of the smartest people. I tell you, my dad was a wise man. He didn't have the schooling, even probably, I don't know how far he went in school, in fact. But he was a very wise man who knew how to keep from becoming angry or saying things that were not proper and right, and how to tolerate people. So he was a wise man in that respect, and I have to give him a lot of credit for that, because he was just a sweet, fairly quiet, but spoke up when he needed to. You know, he was just a very confident man in what he was doing with his work, his farming and all that.
Yeah.
So anyway, I have to give him credit for being a very wise man. He was a deacon too.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah, he was a deacon. They could tell he was good people. Well, that happened to be a booklet that came out in 1960. You don't have to show any more than you wish to, but I was going to tell a little excerpt about the fact that my dad had cancer treatments that were given to him at the hospital where I trained. But there was a famous doctor named Dr. Freckman who wanted to develop something because his mother had died of cancer or was dying of cancer. And he developed one of the first little machines that I can describe that has evolved into a complicated, nice mechanical thing nowadays. But you would give this medication and give it, it was given through a little cannula, a little tubing that went as close to where the tumor could be reached as possible. And his name was Freckman. And the little machine was probably 4 inches wide by 6 inches long, had little fingers in it that just kind of very slowly pressed down on this tubing to make the introduction of the medication into the IV tube to the tumor, made it ever so gradual. That's what they wanted. It wouldn't just have a big gushing thing to go out and be a big dosage. But Dr. Freckman was from our hospital. And we got to work with that little machine. We'd never touched it. We only took out IVs as the main thing was done. But he was the pioneer who started cancer treatments. And my dad got those treatments. And he said that all the time he received the treatments, the pain was gone. I don't know which set of pictures it's in that packet there, Christian, if it's a...
Looks like it's family through the years.
Oh, it's through the years, okay.
Pick a couple.
Okay.
See what we got here.
Did I tell the story about when I was a cheerleader, how complicated it was to get to do it?
Oh, I don't remember.
Okay, I got to tell that story because the picture of the girl that I was going to refer to was in those wedding pictures. I didn't catch it as it went through.
Oh, okay.
But I was not allowed to wear shorts ever. And it was just a thing that I knew not to even ask. And some of the country girls close to me were allowed to wear shorts and keep comfortable when it was just steaming hot. And I just wasn't allowed to, and no question about it. Well, when I was elected to be a cheerleader, you have to wear a little cheerleading skirt that comes just above your knees. You saw the pictures. And I came home and told my mother. My dad wasn't in the house when I told her they voted me a cheerleader. And I thought, there's no way you can be cheerleader. No way. So, this was the week before the famous Brown County Fair, which is a big, big event back there in our area. And they closed down the school for the fair. It was that big a deal.
Wow.
They closed the school down. I mean, for a week. So, my mother was talking to our neighbor, Ruby Julik. She was a family member of this gal I'm going to tell you about. And she says, well, she just didn't know what to do because Betty was wanting to be a cheerleader, and she says she just wasn't going to be allowed to do that. And Ruby Julik told her that one of our, he was probably an elder, her dad, Helen Gelter, had been a cheerleader, and nobody said anything bad about her. So my mom said, oh, everybody loved Helen Gelter, and her picture was there in the wedding photos.
Oh, okay.
But she was one of the people helping serve the food. She had dark hair. If I see it, I'll point it out later. But they said she was allowed to be a cheerleader, and nobody talked against her. And so Mom says, well, Betty, just this time. Well, that's all it takes. One time next year, it was kind of like an honor to be elected, you know.
Wow.
So every year after that, it wasn't even a question. But it was a little bit of a stretch to be able to be a cheerleader.
Man.
And one other little insert that I wanted to share with the world. A bridge over the Ohio River is quite an expensive, massive. It's a lovely creation back there. And one of my uncles, Uncle John D. Moore, had a little bit more than he should have had to drink, and he ran into one of the side rails of the bridge and put a big mark in it. It was a big dent kind of thing.
Oh,
And you think about a bridge with a piece of metal that was created it's just massive and it's curved, and you could not repair that in any way unless you like heated it up, and then you would probably melt some other parts that were attached to it. My Uncle John D. Moore confessed that he had run his truck into that bridge.
Oh, my
He was the
goodness.
one responsible. And I know where the dent is. It's close to the Ohio side. I don't know if you call it north or south. I think it's south. On the bridge, and he gets credit for that. That was my mother's sister, Minnie. She passed away, but it was her husband, and that's how our claim to fame was.
Wow.
That dent in the Ohio Bridge.
That's funny.
I thought that was so good I had to share it with you.
And
He was a
probably
fine
still
guy.
There, huh?
Yeah, it's still there.
Oh my goodness.
That's the
We
part
might have to
about
look that bridge up.
yeah.
That's funny. Just showing some pictures of the family here.
Okay.
So it's probably this side.
That is one of the people that was at the Fairfield church. He was like just a pretty high up guy.
This guy?
Oh, this one. Oh, I got to tell you something special. Remember the name, because his name's going to come up later. He was a really a high position in the electric company somehow. His name is Wayne Hopton. I think it was the electric, Cincinnati's CG&E. And they were like, his wife was just absolutely wonderful. I even have one of those children on the Facebook now. But anyway, they were such an ideal couple, and we had lots of people that worked in the manufacturing plants and had high positions. We're in the Fairfield church. So anyway, they had a fine family, and they were so well respected that they got voted on for the state. Was all great.
Oh, was it like a senator or something? They became a senator?
No, he didn't become a senator. They just voted that it was an ideal kind of family.
Oh, interesting.
Had such a high standard.
Hopkins of Fairfield
Yeah.
represent Ohio in All-American Family Competition.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
I see. It's competition. Interesting.
Yeah. They were some of our really close friends. Those other pictures there, that's a picture of the entrance at the Fairfield Church of Christ. And I think we showed the picture last week of, and that's a picture. Rod was in our backyard, the first little house we lived at. I started to say 201. Do you think about how people use the letter O instead of 0?
Yeah, 201.
201.
I was thinking about that the other day. I always say 1604.
Yeah.
And then it's like, I was thinking about it, I'm like, what if someone thinks I'm saying 16,
Yeah.
the letter O, maybe O-4, right?
Yeah.
It's like, maybe I shouldn't say that.
I do that too, and that's what that was. This is just pictures that will show at an early age. Regina, when she was a little gal, probably a year and a half old.
Little pumpkin.
And that I told you how I learned how to sew. I made that dress.
Yeah.
It's a little pinafore. It was blue and white stripes and little dress that went under it. So the only way we could afford to do that. And I put the picture of Mike in because I wasn't sure of how many opportunities you would have for showing, future things, and you told me that we'll do some more. And when Regina was 3 months old, we went on vacation to the World's Fair, was held in New York. And that is the Allee house that we visited on the way.
Cool.
Yeah, I've got more pictures of that. It's very interesting, but it's called the Allee house. And that picture there is one where it shows the church where Rod went, and Jack and Gloria were there too. First Christian Church, Inglewood. And that was Brother Morgan who suggested that Cincinnati Bible Seminary is a very, very good school to get your education. So that was where he started, and that's how that developed.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Who's this guy?
He was one of our members, but he was just one of those people that had a real high position, and his picture was in the paper. Mr. Girth, yeah. We had several people in the church that were, and then there was a gal that there was an article in there about in the paper where, is that the one where she jumped off the bridge or was going to? And Rod was called to counsel her, and he did. He actually worked with her and talked to her. Rod was an excellent counselor too. He just kind of, we had a teacher in the seminary named Mr. Floyd Heine, who was a real psychologist, and he taught psychology at the school.
And then I see minister and student unhurt in 3-car collision.
Yeah,
Is that Grandpa?
I think that was where he got rear-ended, and he was on a trip to preach up in near where Diane lived, and he had been stopped in the road, and a car came up and literally put the back end of the car into the front.
Huh.
He was pushed up to the front and then went to the back of the car, but he survived it. Anyway, it was a little Renault Dauphine, and they describe it there. Oh, you didn't have to show that one. But that was just me in the paper when I graduated.
There's
In the
Grandma.
Daily Independent paper.
That's her in the paper for her
Yeah,
in
got my graduation.
Russellville, or what was it? What was the city?
Russellville was the closest town, or Decatur's where I went to school.
Yeah, yeah. And she was
Yeah.
in the paper.
Yeah,
Miss Betty Emmons will receive degree.
yeah.
Wow. Very cool. Okay, well, I guess we can start into back into Fairfield,
Okay.
and we can talk a bit about.
Okay, this is when you start a new church and you don't have a building yet, you meet like somewhere that's allowed. And the place where we met was in a school, and at the time they allowed us to use some of the classrooms, for classes for young people. And they don't do that nowadays. They just allow you to meet like in a gym, so to speak. But we carried things in and out to do all the teaching, the preaching, and whatever. And at the time, there was property. I don't know who had bought that. There was another church in town called the North 7th Street Church that had wanted to have another church developed in a area close called Fairfield. So that's why they wanted to start the church at Fairfield, because North 7th Street needed some more help, as far as room and all that. So the property they had purchased was just a piece of land that was like a former big garden or field, or it had a lot of grapevines in it for sure. And so the men would go and have different work weekends where they would clear off the property. I mean, it was just a good job to do. It was grown up and all. But as you can see now, it's a very well taken care of area, so it's all been developed. And so Rod would go and help with that and worked. He was very, very skilled at keeping himself busy. He never lacked for someone to say, well, we didn't see you out there working that day or whatever. They always commented, even in the memory book in there about him, that he was always there helping, whatever.
Yeah.
Well, he not only did that, he made a little newspaper that was sent out every week at the time. The Sower, they called it. They had to think of a name. He did the printing press and kept it maintained. And he did that when he came here too. When he came to First Christian, there was a gentleman who, it was just a wonderful thing to have someone help, named Jim Wilson, who, his son is on my Facebook. But he had help out here with somebody doing some of that. But he would do all this kind of stuff. He would go call on people. He taught on Wednesday night. He preached on Sunday morning and Sunday evening. And people were very drawn to him, honestly. They really were. But I was just going to explain. I was still working when before we were married, of course, and we'd go back and forth to church and so forth. And then we got married, and I continued to work. And one of the ladies who had been a former missionary, her name was Betty Morgan, absolutely wonderful lady, rode down to the edge of Cincinnati and then took a bus into her doctor's office where she worked. She had come back from the mission field, but she was working at a office job now, as a helper. So anyway, she rode with me, and then I would drive on into the Visiting Nurse Association, which I told you I had worked at. So we did that, and we drove down from Fairfield to the place where I dropped her off. We drove through what I call Factory Row. It's on the Mill Creek Expressway, where there are the GE factory, and if you can imagine a building like a city block long, one building. Procter & Gamble was on the other side, car manufacturers.
Wow.
We drove through probably 6 to 7 miles of just nothing but factory buildings. And It was just all big freeway. It was just all easy to travel. So the people who had approached Rod about starting the church had explained that they would just be it would be a very basic, kind of humble salary. So they would increase it in time. And that's kind of important to understand for later. So Rod was doing all this work, and he did counseling, he did weddings, he did all kinds of things. And it probably was, and there's a thing called a faith promise, where they would go to different individuals, or I don't know how they set up the appointments for people to know who wanted to be approached or who even wanted to participate in this, but it's called a faith promise, and that would be like saying that you would like to contribute according to what comes into your home, as well as you're able to, is on faith, to support the building of this new church building. So they had that. And you saw the first structure. It was in their last podcast, a picture of Fairfield, of the building. And after we got married, about 4 months out, I found out I was expecting Miss Regina. And so we were good with that, but we still had an income coming in from his salary and my income. And I continued to work until it was probably around 7 months. I never did get very big, so it was pretty easy to get by with for a good long time.
Yeah.
And so we lived at 201 Lindale Drive, at this little house that had been owned by one of the former residents and members of the North 7th Street Church, and had moved away. So we were able to live there and be okay. And then when we realized that we were expecting, I was not going to be working after that. So around 7 months, I stopped working, and then we had Miss Regina, which was a very happy event. But they still hadn't increased his salary as they had said that they would plan to. So it was a little bit difficult, financially, and Rod is so fine with numbers, and we always lived within what we could afford. We never went out on a limb and incurred a lot of debts ever, except if we bought a car. We would be making payments on that sometimes years later. But anyway, he put an ad in the paper. Minister needs a rental and can afford $60 a month. And so we got an answer. He just thought it was just a long shot. But a person who had gone to a church it was a big church in the edge of Cincinnati, lived in the area, and he had this farmhouse. He was building a new house, so he was going to rent the farmhouse out. So we went and spoke with him, and we rented that house. Well, it's on the edge of town, right behind the schools. It's a very clean, pretty area and everything, but had snakes in the basement. And Betty has been trained to be very cautious about snakes. And I can spot one. Just, I guess I was trained to be mindful of them, and I just have a fear. So anyway, we moved there, and we had a little garden. And Regina was born, and she was born before we moved there. But we had this little garden, and Regina was kind of growing, and she was becoming like a toddler. And one day I was out hanging up clothes, and she always wanted to be with me as much as she could. And I could see the little kitchen, the glass window. There was like a little storm door that you could open the big door and still see through the glass door. And she was pretty content. she was kind of waving to me, and I thought, well, that's good that she's happy. So, but when I went in the house, I found out she had a little stick of butter in her little fist. She'd stand there and take a little bite of that butter. She loved it.
Oh, that's funny.
And anyway.
She loves butter to this day.
To this day. I should never have even scolded her for having that, because she was able to reach it and get it. So I thought to myself later, it's things that but I had to take it away from her, of course.
She's the butter queen. That's how it all started.
Yeah. At this same time, Rod was being a forwarding agent for missionaries.
Now explain that to me. What does that mean?
Okay, I'll tell you what that means. It is the thing where individuals who say, I will donate $10, $12, $50 a month to have Lester or Charlie Bell go to the mission field. And that would come in from like 30 or 40 different sources of people. So that meant that you were receiving all the checks from people, and then you would take care of the banking of it, and then send the check to the missionary or the finances.
Got it.
And it maintained their survival over in the country they were in, and and helped them with their work and helped them to eat and everything. So it's called being a forwarding agent. So he was doing that for, I can't remember if it was Charlie Bell or Lester at the time, but it was busy work on top of what I told you he was already doing. And if he had something to do, he just went out and did it. He just faithfully was doing what he's supposed to. So there was a thing that happened while we lived on that little farmhouse I'll tell you about that was a little interesting. There was a murder in the area of Cincinnati, and it was kind of close to where we lived.
Oh.
And it just put the fear of of people thinking, you just don't know who this person is. And it was not that far away. So there's a famous story of Miss Betty going to the door to answer the door one time with a butcher knife in her hand.
What?
I kid you not.
Really?
But this story was so gruesome that I cannot tell you what the individual was supposed to have done to the victim. And it was openly stated in the news so that people would be aware. Somehow the information of the details got out to us, and it was just absolutely gruesome.
Wow.
What the individual had done. So it just put the fear of not wanting to be alone or whatever. And here, this was a little bit of a, outside of the protection of nearby people. So that was one time that I answered the door and somebody never let me forget it.
And who was it?
Oh, it was just an individual, but I had the butcher knife. I wasn't ready to do anything. I just had it in my hand.
Never be too careful. Huh?
Yeah, and there was a time when you have seen pictures of where a basement comes from the basement to the outside, up some little stairs, and if you could see down what that was built like, it was like layers of rocks. So one time Regina was probably 9 months old, and I was taking this load of laundry out. Now, I did it by hand for a long time. I had a wringer washer, and I did it by hand and took it out to the laundry poles, the clotheslines. But in the little layers of rocks, I saw a little snake woven in there, and I had to walk past it. The steps were probably this far apart, like 3 feet, So, oh my goodness. And the house was locked. I was always being safe with that. The house was locked, so there's no way I could get back into my little 9-month-old baby who was asleep in the house. And went out and there was no way I could make a phone call. You didn't have cell phones.
Yeah.
I was out there. So I had to go back down past that thing. And
How big was it?
oh, it could have been like pencil size, and I would have been scared to death because you never know.
Yeah.
But anyway, I had to bite the bullet and go back down through there and go down the steps into the basement, then up the stairs to the main part of the house. And then another time, there was a little window as the steps go up to the main part of the house. It entered into the dining room area. There was one laying in the window of the basement window. There are these little narrow windows this and that wide. And so that time, I got in there and made a phone call to Rod at the church. And he came home, and one of his friends that was in a picture or so there, Harry Hetrick's son, Ronnie, was with him. They would go out and sometimes have a little meeting together, and have coffee. And Ronnie was just an absolute gem of a friend. He was just really a sweet guy. And they came home and they laughed about my pencil size. But they took care of business and took care of the snake. And then one time we were just walking out the front door. I don't know why, because that's not the way you go to the car. You go through usually I think we did go through the front door. There was great big lawn stretched out in front, and we know that it would go under the house, so it would have a free entrance to get into the basement where I worked with the washing machine.
Right.
So, and then one year they were working on a culvert in the driveway area, and we had a good rain, and it just all went into our basement. And we had finally been able to get an automatic washing machine. And the water was up this high on the washing machine. It was brand new. So we had to call the people out because it stopped working. And the men said, I just really feel so bad. This thing is absolutely brand new, but they had to put another part in it, and it didn't cost probably that much, but they just felt so bad because, it caused that damage.
Right.
So anyway, that's my snake story. And I could look up in the tree and see them kind of little on a branch, coils.
Really?
It was, yeah, I kid you not. It was country.
Wow.
It was the edge of town. It was right backed up to farms would be back over in the area. It wasn't houses. It was
Sounds
really,
like a living nightmare
it was a little nerve-wracking for me.
with all the snakes. Now, were there any dangerous snakes out there?
I don't know. We had copperheads, but I don't know if my dad would talk about copperheads. He knew they were a certain description, and he would beware. But we had lots of black snakes. We had lots of snakes, even on the farm, So, let's see. So we lived there, and Rod kept working. We would go back and forth to California every other year, and my dad was getting more delicate all the time. So sometimes I would go up and stay on the farm and help be there when Mom had to go into work, when he was just really getting very, very ill. But whenever we went, we would always, or on a vacation, so to speak, we would always check with Mom to see that it was acceptable that we be away from home in case something happened. And she always said, well, all you need to do is just call back once in a while. And so she was very good about being understanding.
Yeah.
So we would always, there was a thing called North American Christian Convention. And it was a massive gathering. People would come from California, from all over the United States. There would be like 15,000, 20,000 people. Have just really wonderful speakers in every category. For the women, there were classes for every person. Like they had things for children. They had things for the preachers. It was to help motivate people and encourage them, and be like a giant revival. And I don't think they really have that nowadays, because we went to it every year. Our first 4 days of vacation started there.
Wow.
And there's this one story which Rod shared that I'll tell you, that he had preached at the church in Kentucky, and they liked him a lot, and they were so grateful. He baptized the one woman in the pond, and her shoes came off because of the suction.
Oh, that's fun.
His too, because of the mud. And the husband became a Christian. And this is the thing that was so amazing. Now, mind you, there are 15,000 to 20,000 people coming into this convention center.
Wow.
And they have a massive room, like a gymnasium almost, filled with booths from different people. One would sell Bibles, one would have information about missionary work that they did, whatever. And it would take us 2 or 3 different attempts to get around all the places because he knew so many people. Through the years he had been at college, or being interested in looking at what was there to be seen. Well, this was a year when this young man that was the husband of the wife I just described a minute ago wanted to see Rod so much. And the entryway to this was like, I don't know how many doors. It's a convention center. And he waited at the front of the building, chancing to see Rod. And he waited until he found him.
Wow.
And he just wanted to tell him all the update of good stuff that had happened in their lives, and just his gratitude. It was just really kind of a rewarding thing. But this convention would be held in different very large towns, mostly in the Midwest, because that's the Bible Belt. It's where more people could afford to go to also than they could to travel. They could stay with some friends that they knew in some of the places, in different towns. But when it came to California, it was still pretty well attended, but it wasn't quite as big because that, I said, is the Bible Belt back there, and that's where they had so many hundreds of people who were, just in small churches and would make an effort to go. So we went the first 4 days of our vacation, wherever it was located. We had the ability to go to that, and then on to California after that. That's how we did that. And even when we had vacations back there, closer to home, like the year we went to New York, when Regina was 3 months old, we still went to the convention. So that was a yearly thing. Yeah. We did that until probably 8 or 10 years before he retired. We'd do that. Wow. Because he was. So anyway, after Regina was born, I did not work, and we moved to the little farmhouse, and we lived there for 4 or 5 years.
That's Fairfield, right?
That's Fairfield, yeah. So anyway, this is the one thing that I was going to share about. You saw the man's name, Wayne Hopton. Yeah. There was another family that we were, preachers aren't able to be as close to a lot of people as they would like to. Mm-hmm. And you can tell who wants to really be close friends. But there's another thing that happens. People in the surrounding, like other people in the church, would feel a little bit left out if you were associating with some families more than others. Well, Harry Hetrick was one of the people that was an absolute fine gentleman. And you could tell he just really supported Rod just absolutely to the max. And it was his son, Ronnie, who was the good friend that was more Rod's age, and they were very close, very, very good friends. And he's the one that helped come and take care of the snake business once. Wow. Well, not too many years before we left the Fairfield church, it was like probably half a year, maybe a year, they were having a board meeting. And somehow Harry Hetrick knew that Rod needed to have that income increased like he had been told he should. And none of the women there were working. Now, Harry's wife had a little restaurant, but her children were already grown, and their children were up, teenagers and all that. So this was a bunch of people that would have understood why I wasn't working with the little children, having little kids of my own.
Yeah.
So this is what they wanted to do. They wanted Rod to write down what his expenses were. And very faithfully, he wrote down. So they were having this meeting, and they had the list of what he wrote down. And you can tell if someone's telling truthfully or not, because you can see he pays his bills, and he pays his insurance, and he pays his rent, and it takes this much for gas or whatever.
Yeah.
And Harry Hetrick, I'm not afraid to say these names. He said he was reading the itemized list, and he got down to where it said $10 a week for food, and tears were streaming down his face. And that gentleman that you saw the picture of a minute ago, Wayne Hopton, said, "Rod, could we have you step out for a few minutes?" And they had Rod to step out. And when they had him come back in, they had doubled his salary.
Wow.
They were so absolutely profoundly undone, and they had built this building, and he worked hard. And when we left, there was a lot of tears. So it just goes to show you how different people just don't think about certain kinds of things in relationship to life, and treating people in the right way and putting certain things in priority. And so anyway, that was the story of how he got his increase in salary.
Wow.
And nobody really fussed with him or seemed to have a problem. It's just a mindset of people that are in control or in charge or whatever to do that. But that was a profound night. He came home and told me about it.
Yeah.
He says, "You'll never guess what happened."
Yeah.
And they doubled his salary. And that man was Wayne Hopton, and he was executives of some kind in GE.
Yeah.
And he thought the world of Rod. He just knew that he was working hard and all that. So it just really.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And you never know when there are people who have a responsibility, who just have like an agenda. So you just don't let that be the judgment of who you are.
Yeah, definitely.
So then, after that, Mr. Mike was born. That was 4 years later. And we went on a trip when he was about 8-9 months old. We went on our trip to California, and I have a picture of Grandpa Allee giving him his first haircut, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know where that picture is, but I'll show it next time. And so anyway, Mike was born, and we went there, and then Rod had an interview. His mom and dad were not Christians yet, he had an interview with someone and had a trial sermon, and we went and Mom went with us. She didn't really understand. I barely understood what was really happening, but I knew that was his home, and I had to be mindful that he had been back there for many years, and so when he got hired to come out here, we came.
Mm.
So that's another whole story, and that's a and we came to the church at First Christian, and they had had a lot of difficulties through the years, back and forth, and things that you find out later, but were very, very big complications. But it was a different world out here, and so anyway, we came to First Christian, and one time I remember him coming home after making calls on different people. He says, "You'll never know what I found out tonight."
Oh man.
And that it had been like a real difficult thing that happened in a church where some person had, it was a scandal kind of thing, and
Yeah.
and he said the things that he would find out were just really not typical. So he came to a different world. It's a complicated thing, but he started and worked hard again, and only person on staff, and he built it up until it was like they were able to hire another associate to come and help, and then after that they were able to hire another associate. So you can tell he worked very, very hard.
Yeah.
It takes a lot to pay 3 salaries.
Yeah, definitely.
And so he came to a church that was very wounded. I was going to start to say it was sick, but it was wounded, and worked with people. And I have pictures in there of how many kids would be in the family, or the it wasn't called a family camp yet. That's when the moms and dads would go. But he would take a week and go to up in the mountains where they would all congregate, and had a camping time where they had like 200 or 300 kids, and he would have to be in charge of all the kids.
Wow.
And there would be workers helping, of course, but they would be all different ages. They would have like certain age groups go at a certain time, but it was from all churches around. So it was big. It was a big deal. And he would come home from that camp after
And where was that at?
north of Bakersfield. You go through Bakersfield to get to it.
I've been there.
You have?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've got to get the name of that, because he went for many years, and that was the one thing that I would be back here and stay with whoever was still at home, Mike or Regina, because they couldn't go the same times. They were different ages. But I have pictures, and the pictures that are probably this wide, it shows the number of kids. What a job! And those kids were just like, really, they weren't quite as out of control as some children could be, but there were difficult ones.
Yeah, sure.
And he would be in charge and work there for a week, and then come home and preach the next morning.
Wow.
Yeah, he would always come home, and whoever he had in the car with him, he would give a ride, to like 3 or 4 little kids that needed transportation to and from. And he would treat them to their lunch, whatever, no, McDonald's, whatever.
Yeah.
And then we would be able to go and have a little time together, eat something. I never ate out if he wasn't home, ever. But then that was always a treat. He would get home, But he'd preach the next morning and the next night. Oh, yeah, twice. On Sundays he preached. Oh, yeah, different sermons, of course.
Really?
So that's how busy he was and how dedicated to doing a job that he did.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that was out here.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
First Christian.
Let's put a pin in this, and we'll start from there.
Okay.
Okay. I want to do a couple
Okay.
life story cards.
Okay.
Get some random questions at you. Let's see what we got. Okay. We'll do one of each from. There's early, mid, and late. Those are the
Okay.
questions. Later life and reflection, early life, and midlife.
Okay. You go for it.
I'll just pick some random ones here. Let's see. Okay, so let's do early life. So I know you've told us a little bit about this, but this question is, what was your childhood home like?
My childhood home was like what you would see in a Western movie of a very primitive, do every single thing from scratch that you can imagine. It was now that I think about it, it was absolutely a wonderful life because I learned to appreciate the progress that has been made in comfort, so to speak. But it was much like, I lived in big houses. I mentioned that, in Kentucky. But I learned to appreciate the modern conveniences, but I do know what it's like to have humility and humbleness in living, and so I could make do from scratch probably better than most people.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that's apparent. I mean, I can vouch for that because you're definitely efficient and with what you do and how you save and how you're thrifty with things.
It's one of the reasons I have so much stuff.
It's apparent in the way you live your life.
Yeah.
So here's a question from midlife. What was your favorite story when your kids were teenagers? When your kids were teens, is there maybe something funny they did, or they got in trouble? Maybe Regina got in trouble, or Mike got in trouble, or something.
My kids were teenagers.
When they were teens, did they do anything funny, or
funny?
Did they need saving? Did they get stuck in a ditch somewhere and you had to go save them?
Oh, that's a good one.
We can say that for next time.
Okay,
that's actually a good
I have
question.
to think about something good.
And then here's actually this one's a bit more somber and serious, but what is the hardest thing you've ever been through?
The hardest thing I've ever been through. You hurt for other people because you're able to be alongside that person, and yet you love that person and you don't want them to have the pain that they're having. So I would say being a nurse and knowing the seriousness of a loved one that's not going to be with you. And but also I think about my mom being far away when she was alone and died. And I think about my dad, who was years in dying, and yet we understood that was happening at the time. And that my sweet Rodney, having years of surgeries and doctors able to help him be better again, always have that hope that he's going to still be around. But that's probably the most agonizing because you love somebody else. And if you are wise enough to know what's going on, that's painful. But also, I will have to say, with all of those, that the knowledge that they were all going to be in a good place when they're gone is another thing that takes the pain away. You think about it and you think, well, and I think about some of the the martyrs in the years gone by who were tortured or cut in half or whatever for their faith. And I think that's momentary. So I'm just thankful that we have a hope and that the pain will go away. But that is probably the hardest.
Yeah.
Watching the people you love, because it hurts more to have to see them than to feel it yourself. Like I can stand it pretty much. In fact, when I hurt my leg, I didn't even take any pain pills.
Wow.
And yet I'm sure the family thought, oh, I feel bad she hurt her leg. But, it goes to show you if you watch some little child being in misery and not able to help them, you would hurt more than they did. You just would want to feel loving toward them.
Yeah.
But the comfort of knowing that they're going to be okay in just a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry to end the podcast with such a sad question, but
That's yeah.
that was a wonderful answer.
It's a real answer.
Yeah. Well, Grandma, I love you.
I love you more.
Thanks for doing this podcast with me, and we'll see you guys next time.
Thank you.